The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I am joined this week by two fantastic co-hosts.
Laura Nash.
And Nate Heininger.
And this week we are talking about Gunbrella.
Gunbrella by
name.
Boinksoft. Just great
Doinksoft.
names all around.
You guys are great at names.
Great names. Yeah, and we've been blessed with great names from this company before. We covered their previous, or at least one of their previous games, Gato Roboto.
For folks who maybe didn't play that one or haven't listened to that episode, it's one of the best short Metroidvanias, a thing that's very hard to do well. Metroidvanias kind of by design kind of end up being kind of sprawling and exploratory, etc. And, if you try to tighten them down to like a 3 to 5 hour experience, you tend to lose a lot of that feeling. But Gato Roboto did it really, really well, while also being very cute and about a cat in a mech.
Cat in a mech suit.
Yeah. What more could you ask for? A cat in a mech suit Metroidvania. So I think, we loved Gato Roboto. And so when you see Doinksoft, which is, again, just rolls right off the tongue, does it not? Doinksoft. You see they're coming out with another game. It's called Gunbrella. I mean, what more could you ask for? So I was very hyped about this game.
May more companies put out games that explicitly say what the game is about in the
Yes.
title. This is a
Yes.
gun umbrella. That was a Gato and a Roboto. Please. The number of times someone asked me for a game recommendation, I have to search my memory for what indie weird title, that was and once we went to the moon and back. I'm making that up.
No, it'd
Gato
be like,
Roboto.
once we went to the moon and back, a tale about going to the moon or
Yeah.
something. Everyone loves colons.
Or it's called just a noun that it's
Yeah.
completely ungoogleable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, good job, Doinksoft.
And Gunbrella, I mean, it is what it sounds like. It's a gun umbrella, and the entire game is focused around this Gunbrella, which we're gonna spend some time talking about. I think if at the beginning we typically kind of give our opening thoughts about the game, and while I was really, really excited to cover this game and really excited to dive into it, I think this episode's probably going to be like our Dredge episode, where we have quite a range of opinions and some things that I personally really loved about this game, but also there are a few things that ultimately left me a little bit wanting. How about you two?
I think the central mechanic of this worked like gangbusters for me. I'm take it or leave it on platformers. It's all about the controls for me. And for this, that part worked well. Story and environment were fine. I mean, the art is great, but it's just not an environment I cared to spend time in, and the world wasn't exciting for me. But I very much enjoy. I really like it when the combat is melded with movement mechanics.
Mhm.
That is my sweet spot, because I'm generally not great at combat alone. And so when they pair the two, I think it's much more powerful. So that's my TLDR. Gunbrella, the object is great.
The best part about this game is the Gunbrella. Yeah, so they really again nailed it with the naming.
How about you, Raygan?
I feel this is a weird episode for me because I feel really unprepared for it, in that I bounced off this game really early. So this is like Laura, I think that the actual physicality of the Gunbrella, theoretically it works for me, but I had a kind of a hard time with its controls for some reason. Maybe I'll try to explore that a little bit more, but
were you on controller or keyboard? I
was playing mostly on the Steam Deck, and so it's a controller. So I wanted to like this game really bad because, again, like the whole Gunbrella concept seems cute and fun. The playing through the initial like tutorial stages where it kind of introduces you to the mechanics. I'm like, okay, I get this. I like it. I like that you can do the little Gunbrella swoosh. We'll talk about some of the mechanics with the Gunbrella in a minute, but like it has that sort of like Princess Peach float kind of thing a little bit.
Mary Poppins,
yeah, Mary Poppins, but also brutal takedowns. And
it's nothing to do with Mary Poppins. This is it's just for the floating.
Yeah, and so I was into it, right? But it's just so interminably talky. And then I finally got through, like, it feels like it never really wants to let you actually play. And then when you get to I got to the first boss, like really just the first boss, and I hit a complete wall with it. And just the combination of those factors ended up just sort of putting me off completely. And, I really did try to get past that first boss, but I usually feel really competent at platformers. This is like an area of strength for me, right? Like we do a platformer, I'm like, hell yeah, let me get in there. I'm going to jump all over that shit. And like this game, like, I don't know, it made me feel bad at platformers. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah. The first boss, I think, also was the most difficult, though. That may just be because it's the first thing that like really tests you, and so if you can beat that, the subsequent tests just feel a little bit better. But I had a difficult time with the first boss. I played this game also on Steam Deck. I also played it primarily while I was on a plane. So I had 2 very long flights over this last couple weeks, and part of it was just the fact that I was like, well, I'm sitting in this seat. I brought my Steam Deck as one of my primary means of entertainment, and I'm just going to grind away at this boss. And I was able to get past it, and then wasn't challenged as much by really any of the subsequent bosses.
That's weird. Considering it's like the first one. I mean, and there's other enemies earlier, of course. Like there's other stuff to fight.
Well, what happened with me, and this sort of helped inform later bosses, is that I think the game early, like in the beginning, really does like reward playing quickly, zooming around the map and like jumping up on guys before they see you and blasting them away with your Gunbrella. And then when you get to the first boss, though, it becomes way more of a like, let's slow down and learn the boss's patterns and find safe spots to deal damage, rather than this like aggression that I think the standard stages, you benefit by being aggressive, but the bosses, you have to pull back. And once I figured that out and like took the time to memorize the patterns, I was able to beat the boss without really taking much damage, but I died a ton getting to that point as well.
And that makes sense. Not to like harp too much on the first boss before we get into much other stuff here, but like the first boss was where I really started feeling the limitations of the Gunbrella. Like as a gun, it is your primary gun, and you can have other guns. You can equip other stuff like grenades or a machine gun that you can collect ammo for. But the Gunbrella is unlimited ammo. It's sort of your
shotgun,
your mega blaster. Yeah. But it is a shotgun. It's so short range. Yeah. So the whole beginning of the game really sort of trains you like avoid shots, get in close, get in quickly before they can get a shot off at you, and blast them with the shotgun of the Gunbrella.
I basically played like a monk in 5th edition D&D. Run in, hit everybody, back up. Like that was my go if you're a D&D player.
And that approach did not work at all with the boss, because if you're close enough to hit him with the Gunbrella, you're close enough to get hit. You get like 3 or 4 hits and you're dead. And that first boss has an absolutely unbelievable amount of health. So like blasting him with the Gunbrella, it's it doesn't fire very quick. It's shotgun style. You might take off what, I don't know, looked like a 200th of his health with each shot. Like we're talking about like really small slivers of his fairly large health bar. So it was, I kept thinking I was doing something wrong. Like I've clearly like misunderstood the assignment here. And so I went and looked up a video of people playing the boss. And it's like, it seemed like, no, they were pretty much doing what I was doing. They were just not getting hit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I found it like, it was like a weird wall. Anyway, let's talk more. Let's go back though, because I don't want to focus too much on the spot where I fucked up and instead talk about like, let's go over the mechanics here, because like the mechanics are the strength. The Gunbrella is cool. Nate, what are all you can do so many things with the Gunbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, as I started playing this game, not very long into it, I was like, this is one of my favorite control schemes I've played in a platformer. The range of movement, the freedom that you get with this thing is incredible. So we've kind of touched on a few of the pieces already, but basically it is exactly what it sounds like. So you have a gun, and it can also become an umbrella. So your move set is you control your character with a standard with the analog stick, and you have full range of movement, and you can jump, and you can open up your umbrella, which makes you into this floaty little guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you have full range of control while you're floating around, so you can zig and zag around in the air however much you need. You fall relatively slowly, so it's a huge range of movement while you have the umbrella. You also can wall jump, so you can bounce off the wall and then unleash your umbrella to give yourself additional height. But the key here, the key move that really opens up the traversal, is that if you open up the umbrella as you are pointing in a certain direction, you basically do a small dash. And this dash, if you're just on the ground, it just works like a forward and backward dash. But if you are pointed into the air in really any direction, you will fly up in the air with your umbrella out. And so that allows you to, this dash can be activated at any time. You can do it one time to get like up in the air. And then if you touch the wall, you can do it again, which allows you to have full wall climb capabilities. You can basically go up to the wall, do the dash, umbrella yourself back over to the wall, do the dash, and wall climb, and really go in any direction. As long as there's a piece of like wall or something in the area, you can basically float around forever. You can just keep wall dashing and wall jumping and dashing up in the air and floating around as much as you want. And so this allows, basically, you can, this game is like most platformers, you've got your little screen in front of you with your platforming challenge. You can basically go anywhere at any point, and it's up to you to figure out what is the right angle and how do you make, some of the jumps are kind of long and whatnot, but it's just a complete range of movement. And then during all this, you can also fire your shotgun. So it does allow for some, really fun, like what Laura was saying, that I really enjoyed as well, is that you'll enter into a screen with bad guys who also have guns or some sort of weaponry, and you can basically like Gunbrella yourself to where you're landing like right on top of them. You can fire, like what I did a lot was firing downward, like umbrella over someone, drop down and fire the shotgun straight down. So you just land right on top of them. And it's incredibly satisfying. And it allows for some, I think, really good platforming moments where you have like such a range of movement. Most of these games are about limiting your movement. You only have one dash, you only have like one jump or whatever. And can you nail it? This is like, you can kind of go anywhere at any time. So, making these puzzles pretty interesting.
And the Gunbrella is even defensive, so you can use it as a shield. And it's like it's got this like almost like not boomerang, but it's got this like bounce back effect occasionally if you get the timing right. So if I was not feeling particularly aggressive, I mean, again, the Gunbrella is a short range, so if you want to actually kill anybody, you got to get up in there. But you can kind of slowly zoom around the screen, like slowly just float, like get in the right position, drop, kill some people, and get out. That was a really satisfying because a lot of platformers are mostly like get in, close, clear, move on. And this was nice to kind of dip in and back. I was able to, I don't know if that was my preferred play style or if that was what the game was encouraging, but it worked for me for the non-bosses.
Yeah, I would definitely I think I just went on full aggression where I would just land, fire the shotgun, and just try to hop around while it reloads, and then fire the second shot. But it does allow you for quick escapes. You can go very, it's very vertical. And most of the bad guys are, at least through the majority of the game, not including bosses, most of them are firing very directional, and it's very telegraphed when they're going to shoot. And so it's relatively easy to avoid, enemy gunfire. It does.
Yeah, you can get pretty mobbed, but you can umbrella your way out of it.
Yeah. However, they do, and I thought this was a good complication. Later in the game, you are also fighting people who essentially have gunbrellas, or you're fighting birds and shit that are surprisingly evasive. So they do. The first part of the game, it's a lot of stuff where it's all on the ground level and you control the skies. It gets a lot harder later when the skies are also a dangerous area. There are a couple bad guys later that are faster than you in the sky, and that gets complicated, and you get in some sort of interesting, almost aerial combat with your gunbrella, which was fun. And that's where for this game really worked for me, was if I'm using the gunbrella in this game, I was generally having a good time. Now, unfortunately, I think you're using the gunbrella maybe half of the time, because this is a wildly deep story game.
Yeah,
and they put a lot of peanut butter in this chocolate, man. There's a lot of peanut butter in this chocolate bar.
This is a lot of mayonnaise in this chocolate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And if Shane were here, he would also be complaining, because we recently did the Mechanics We Hate episode, and he talked about needless backtracking. This game is 100% full of backtracking. There's a lot of stages and dungeon style things that you're breaking into, clearing, and then most games nowadays, there's a magic exit at the end of after you beat the boss. There's
just a portal.
Cool, this elevator takes me to the front door, but in this game it's no, you got to get all the way back out, and they try to complicate it usually by having, this is all about the story, but there's a demon thing that's chasing you. So it's a little bit like a pizza tower where your exit is now a complicated thing. But I don't know. I didn't really just doing the same platforming challenges in reverse while being chased. I didn't really like it in Pizza Tower, and I didn't really like it in this either. It felt like I just want to go back. I just want to do new things with the Gunbrella and not redo the things I've already done. But yeah, I don't know. Was there anything else about because I feel like we're going to get into a long discussion
about the story
and a bit ranty about the story. So I don't know. Is there anything else about the mechanics and
sound design?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed all the sounds of this game are really pleasing.
It's a very wet game.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna be gross, I want you to be full on Ren and Stimpy, make everything sound like meat being thrown at a wall. If you're gonna be gross, I want you to go for it. I don't want you to put gross images on screen and not have a wet splat.
Yeah, there's a lot of splats.
Yeah, that's something we didn't really talk about. This game is way more for a pixel art game with very small, character sprites. This game feels more graphic than you would expect, and I think part of it is just because it does some very, I don't know what they're doing to simulate blood splatter with their pixel art, but they put in the effort to make, when you point blank somebody with the Gunbrella, they go and hit the wall,
and that red stands out on that brown.
It does. It does like a star pattern of blood that just splatters and stains the map, and it's there until you leave. And lots of body parts go flying as well, little bits and body parts. You know what this game made me think of constantly? I don't think we ever did it for the show, but it's a game that I think we all really enjoyed. Do you remember Hook Champ?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember Hook Champ.
There's a lot of aesthetic similarities between this game and Hook Champ. And then Hook Champ, when you would land in the lava, you would just immediately turn into bones and like all of that would go flying. And you also had a gun where you were shooting the thing that was chasing you. Like same thing in this game. You're shooting a thing that's chasing you. And you will frequently turn to bones. So I just felt like there was some similarities between the game. I actually at one point was like, did Doinksoft do Hook Champ? Like it felt so similar to me, but no, they did not do Hook Champ.
No. A bit of a side note while we're talking about the games that that Doinksoft did. So we obviously really enjoyed Gato Roboto. I didn't mention the other game that they've come out with between Gato Roboto and this one. And I think a lot of people didn't play it, and I still haven't either. But this is funny. When I was getting ready for this, I looked up the Wikipedia, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. They did that game, Demon Throttle." Mm-hmm. Demon Throttle was a game that Doinksoft developed for the Switch, and then released exclusively on cartridge. It was a thing that they did as a collaboration with Devolver and Special Reserve Games, which is a company that does fancy physical re-releases of primarily digital only games, mostly on Switch. And they do special editions, but they also just do straight up, here's a cartridge of a game that maybe has been out for a little while, but previously was digital only, kind of like Limited Run, but they've got a different kind of vibe. But what was funny about this was I was like, oh yeah, didn't I buy that? And I went over to my shelf and I looked through my Switch games and I found Demon Throttle, and it's still in the shrink wrap. I've never opened it. I was like, oh crap, I bought this and I forgot to open it and play it. So sorry to Doinksoft. I can't comment on whether Demon Throttle was any good. It does look kind of neat, but it's kind of a weird thing. It's a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up style game with NES style graphics. Vertically scrolling shooter, but not you're not like a spaceship or a plane. You're like a little guy running around. And I don't know, this game looks really fun. I might give this a try now that I realized that I bought it potentially about a year ago and then never actually opened it. So thank you to Gunbrella for reminding me that I bought this game and never opened it.
What an interesting choice to do a physical only release in 2022 or 2023.
Yeah,
that came out.
This was the only one of these that Devolver and Special Reserve have done.
I wonder how it went for them if they're going to do it again.
I wonder.
Yeah.
I would guess that this is a pretty small seeming game. It was it's a pretty niche thing, like an NES style vertically scrolling shoot 'em up on the Switch. That's a kind of a niche thing. If they were going to sell this on the Switch eShop, it probably would have been like a $5, maybe $10 indie, right? But here they get to sell it for $30 because it's on a cartridge. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Maybe they made more money this way. I don't know. But it is a weird choice. Weird thing to see.
Yeah,
I'll let you know. If it's really good, then I guess maybe I'll make all of you guys play it for the show.
You can just mail around your
the cartridge around.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit more.
We have to talk about the story.
We got to talk about the story, but it's difficult to even talk about the story because it's just so long-winded and strange. But I'll at least try to set up the frame here, and then we can kind of talk through, at least as far as everyone got. So. Classic wife and kid dead story.
Kidnapped kid. But come on.
The beginning is he's out in the forest in the winter, cutting wood or collecting mushrooms or something, and then you see a smoking house on fire in the distance, and cut to years later, embittered guy. It's a worst setup. Yeah. It's a trope. Yeah,
it's a trope, right? It's now a revenge story. It's very quickly you understand that this is a revenge story.
Just please, somebody kill the husband for once, like, please kill the husband and have the wife go on a revenge story. Like, all I'm asking for is, like, at one point, maybe someone breaks in while the wife is gathering mushrooms and murders the husband, and then she is to revenge the husband's death. Just do the exact same game with the guy dying one time.
Kill more. You heard it here, folks. Kill more husbands. That's all we're asking.
That's why I went so hard for Overboard.
That game made up for a lot of other. There's a lot of.
I get one.
In that one.
I get one every 10 years.
Every loop.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so, you're coming into kind of a trope, it's kind of a trope fest in a lot of ways on this. And the action plot is that your character doesn't know who has killed his family, but he has this gunbrella. I guess the bad guy left the gunbrella.
Left it, which, why would you leave such a cool thing?
Yeah, I know, right? And so this is your piece of evidence. And so the game starts out with you're like, well, I got to figure out who made this gunbrella, who had it, and maybe that will lead me to understanding who killed my family. Which, I mean, that's fine. It's like you said, I kill the husband, please. But as far as like, you would think like, if this game is going to be 90% floating around, shooting stuff with a shotgun, and deep diving the interesting mechanics, then you've given me enough of an action plot. Like, that's fine. All right, I got my gun and I got to go figure out who killed my family. Whatever. But what actually proceeds to happen is a complicated series of quests and like exploration that has you interacting with like a town mayor, a cult, a protest, like a union protest. There's so many different characters that have deep, long stories that you have to talk to everyone in order to move these things forward. There's like
also a pretty in-depth quest log. Like, you talk to a character, they add a thing to your quest log. You're going to have to return to them later to tell them that you did the thing that they asked you to do. Like, I was not expecting any of that in this game. Like, based on like what I saw in trailers and in screenshots, I was expecting this to be like frontmost an action game. Mm-hmm. I was not expecting to have to like read lengthy chunks of dialogue, and I was certainly not expecting to like spend what felt like half of the time talking to people.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you're spending more time in this game walking around talking to people than you are actually engaging in gunbrella activities. And so it's constant. You'll get you get a couple small scenes of fun gunbrella things, and then you're dropped in like a big town, and you have to you have to talk to everyone. You have to figure out what the next step of the plot is. You have to maybe solve some minor little dialogue puzzles where like this person over here tells you one thing, so you go back to this person who tells you another thing. Then you have to go back to the person A to tell them the thing that person B told you, which will unlock a dialogue tree at person C so that you can go talk to them to go into a tunnel that maybe gives you a little bit more gunbrella activity. But then you have to go back and tell all three of those characters about what you did in those tunnels, and what you saw, and like, it's just much.
And like you have to choose dialogue choices in a lot of this stuff. Like, that's cognitive load that like I sometimes was not ready for in this. It's not like a major deal, but like every time you talk to one of these characters, you're making like 5 or 6 dialogue choices. Yeah. And like normally I'm all about dialogue choices, but like the story isn't interesting. Like I was not curious who made the gunbrella, right? And I was not interested in talking to these characters. What I wanted to do was play an action game. This game basically advertises itself as an action game. And I just it was so strange, like how much, not just how much of time, but like how much it really seemed to expect you to like engage in this as a world, where it just doesn't feel like it was like much of a world. I don't know.
Yeah. I wish there was like I've been trying to really think about like what made this like not click, because like you said, like on paper, like this still all sounds great to me, you know, like great platforming mechanics with a story that's like deeply embedded. Like I'm here for that, but just the story itself was so strange and dry, and most of the characters are kind of off-putting, so you're not really particularly feeling strongly for any of them. And you feel like you've been dropped into this world. They try to make you feel like you've been dropped into this world that has like a complicated socio-economic dynamic going on, and like you're just
it feels like you're in the middle of like a kind of a slow moving disaster. Like every time you roll into one of these, well, okay, I rolled into the first town basically. There was a little town before that, but like it feels like there's something deeply wrong here, right? There's like cult activities, and there's like, all of the characters are like not wanting to talk to you because whatever reasons, and you have to talk to 3 different guys in order to get the guy to like give somebody a password to like, et cetera, et cetera. Like, so it just sort of feels like this is not a world that I felt excited to explore. And I think that's the biggest problem. Like if this had been a game where like maybe that the world were more engaging and the characters were more interesting, then maybe that sort of 50%, walk and talk part of the game would have been more engaging for me. That's not something that I'm not allergic to talking to people in an action game, but
of course, it made me think of a game that we covered a while ago, but it's really stuck with me, which was Katana Zero. You remember that game?
I was thinking about that during this game too.
Yeah, and Katana Zero, we had some similar struggles with, in that like the core gameplay of mechanic of Katana Zero was brilliant. But it also had a ton of dialogue and a wildly complicated plot. But the thing about that game is that wildly complicated plot was almost so absurd and strange and like rooted in weird psychology that I did feel somewhat compelled to see what was going to happen next, simply because it was so weird, and even though I didn't ultimately click with the story very well, like it was over the top, and it
did sort of propel you on to the next action moment too. Like it felt like it was like trying to hype you up to go do the next big thing. Whereas, I don't know, this sort of...
And I'll be real, the house music soundtrack was dope as hell. And so I was like, sure, plot, why not?
That soundtrack was my top played thing on Spotify. For they do like the rap
so
thing.
Good.
It was my number one played album in whatever year that was, 2018 or something. And I still listen to it pretty regularly.
Dialogue over a killer track, I'm a lot more... I'm just don't care, but I'm listening to the music instead.
But it's like it's
the thing that
so
struck me
big.
Here, the thing that struck me here was like how short some of the action sequences between these dialogue
the
things were.
Ratio was off.
Oh yeah, the ratio was way off. Like you spend like 10 minutes like amping up to go into a sewer or whatever and fight some rats, and then like fighting the rats takes like 3 minutes, and you're like, okay, now I got to go talk to people and find my next quest again, and it's just like. I could have done with that being completely inverted. Like this game would have been, I think, way better served by like having the dialogue be like 30% or less of your time, and and have the action sequences be significantly longer, maybe with more save points in the middle of them or something, because the weighting was completely off.
It also commits a few, I believe, mortal sins of a modern game. One of which is that you're talking to these guys. To these characters so much, and the way they do it is you have to like interact with an NPC by pressing A or whatever. They run through dialogue, then they're done, and then you have to press A again to get to the next step of the dialogue. Like you have to re-engage with the NPC. They'll say something new, and then it ends.
That's true.
And you can walk around again, and then you have to press A again. And so what that does, at least for me, is basically 100% of the time, I did not know if I had pulled all of the dialogue from the NPCs. So you would have to press A again and go until it would then eventually loop. And very often the last thing it wouldn't loop, it would repeat the last thing that the NPC had said to you. And so that's how you know you're done, because they're now repeating themselves. But sometimes that last thing they said was like a full run that with like dialogue choices and things like that. So you'd basically have to repeat it. And like, I feel like, most games nowadays, once you've run the NPC full dry of unique dialogue, that when you interact with them again, they'll say something like, I've got nothing left to say to you, kid, or like, whatever it might be that's like, I'm done with you. But this, they just do the last thing. So it just like, I don't know, it kills immersion for me, because now I'm repeating the same conversation I just had. And it's just a drag because I have to do it with like everybody. I don't know if maybe you guys were better at identifying when the conversation was done, but I found myself like constantly having to like redo the last stage of the dialogue because there was no way to know.
Yeah, I had similar problems. I didn't get far enough, I think, to maybe have that grate on me quite as much, but like that is something that bothers me in games. Like, and dialogue systems are hard. Like, sometimes you want that option to go talk to the character again because maybe you missed something or you forgot a detail and you think you might need it. There's it can be a difficult problem to figure out like what the right approach is with delivering dialogue in a game like this. Nobody likes the like the Animal Crossing thing where you talk to a guy and you have to page through like 16 pages of dialogue and you accidentally press A one too many times at the end and he starts over and you're stuck listening through it again. Like nobody likes that. I hate it. But like, but sometimes you do need that option to go and listen to the dialogue again. And it's hard to like, do that. But yeah, this game, not super successful in that regard. Like I know it's a hard problem, but it's not done well here.
It is. They also have a couple points where, so like later in the game, there are some more challenging Gunbrella situations, and so it's not uncommon to die, and you respawn back at this park bench, and there are park benches all over the place, and that's your save point. And like for the most part, I feel like they are pretty well spaced. You get over something that's particularly challenging and you get to save, and it also heals you. And generally, I thought they were good at this placement. But there's a couple points, and one in particular that's near the end of the game, that you do a large amount of interacting with NPCs, and then there's a particularly, at least for me, there was a really challenging platforming situation. And then the park bench is at the end of that. And so if you die during that challenge, you start all the way back at the beginning. It's essentially the same as, where you have to watch the boss cinematic every time you want to fight the boss. That's what it felt like in this game, because it would start you all the way back at the beginning. And I have to run into town, have all of these interactions again to sort of check the boxes of talking to these people, and then go and make another attempt at the challenging platforming thing. And it's like, if you're going to have this amount of dialogue, like I need to be able to do the dialogue one time and then take as many efforts as I want at the platforming challenge, rather than having to do all of the dialogue again before I do my next attempt at the platforming. And one of them was so frustrating that I was like, you know what? Nothing that they said to me was particularly interesting. So I'm just going to stop talking to all these people. I'm just going to run past all of it and just go straight to the platforming challenge. And because I had known what you talk about, but I didn't actually do it in my save that like I made it through, I was curious if that would have an impact. And no, when you eventually backtrack and they say everything to you as if I had already heard all of the stuff that I should have had when I talked to him the first time. I don't know if that made sense. Like they treated me like I had stopped to talk to them, even though I never had. So it was like, oh, it doesn't even actually matter if I talk to any of these NPCs. It's all just going to have the exact same outcome anyway. So it was like little things like that it's like made the excessive amount of dialogue and plot just a little bit more frustrating when the platforming and the action and whatnot was so good. It really felt like a drag, like constantly. That it's kind of like what we talked about with Dredge, how like every little island is its own little universe and they really don't have anything to do with each other. That's kind of what it is too in this game to some degree. Like there's some repeating characters, but you're just constantly meeting new characters. I don't know what the total amount is, but there's probably like 30 or 40 different distinct characters in this game. And all of them want to talk to you all of the time and in different capacities. And it's like too much. It's like, I don't really care about this town. I don't really care about this story, but I have to talk to everyone all the time and solve these little dialogue puzzles to move forward. So it's like, I could see this working if the story's really, really good and really, really compelling, but instead it was just kind of dull. It's strange though. I'll give you that. Like there's like cults and monsters and weird goo creatures and kidnapped kids and
bad police, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, a bad union. Like it's all over the place. You get captured and you spend years in a prison and you make all these friends and then you fight tentacles and like it just gets all over the place, which you would think I would like. That's what I would, go big, but there's just something about it that
I think it's the balance. I think it's a balance. And also like, this world wasn't my favorite. I don't mind a dystopia. I know I'm gonna love Disco Elysium if I ever have the time to play it. I know
we need to cancel the podcast for a year and all of us play Disco. Yeah, I know Nate has already played it.
It's not even that long.
I know.
I really think at this point I call it my favorite game, and
that's so good.
But
it makes me sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, Laura. Yeah, so I need to play the game. Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, I'm just saying, like, I don't mind a dystopian world. It's not the squishiness or the grossness or the steampunkiness or the brown. It's just really brown.
So brown. It's a very brown game.
Very brown.
Very brown. But I think I need a little bit. I don't know. It just felt very simple in some ways. Like there's a lot of crazy stuff happening, but they didn't glue together in a bigger whole that made me excited. Maybe it goes back to that original plot hole of like the whole thing rests on the fact that someone killed your wife and took your kid and left the weapon behind. Like what? Like there's that kind of logic hole is just throughout the game, and I'm okay. Again, I like a nonsense game. I don't need to think too hard about the plot, but the fact that I noticed it is generally a bad sign.
Well, there's like it's like the things they decide to spend their time on from a plot standpoint, where it's like at one point you talk to this preacher or holy man and you learn about like his church, and you hear like you have several dialogue bubbles about like praise be to this person's God and like the history of their church and what they're doing to try to save the town and whatnot. And like, I'm not worried or I'm not, I like a deep plot game and a deep lore game. Just none of it felt that well connected or that interesting. Like I feel like we're really circling a good point here. It's just like but I can't put words to it. It's just all kind of boring.
Yeah. I think first of all, to really salvage this game, and I think this is a salvageable game if they were going to go back and kind of rethink, but the number one thing I would do is give every single character that you have to talk to a dialogue option that says, just give me the quest. Just give me the quest, and make every other piece of dialogue that's not absolutely 100% critical, optional extra thing, and make it super clear what's what, right? Because like, I don't want to talk to the guy about his church either, and I don't want to sometimes it would give you dialogue choices, but it didn't seem like it was a choice. It was just here's a list of things that you have to talk about all of them until it figures out that you've talked enough, and then it'll give you a quest, right?
Yeah, John Ingold has a talk on designing narratives, where he uses an example from the Blade Runner movie as like how to write in ink and how to give, and he talks about like you need to have exits for people who do not care. and do not want to engage with the nonsense. You need to have clear, like, get me out of this conversation lines that people can just jump to the next important stage. Like, I'm done with this nonsense. And he, it's something I've used in my work as well. I'm like, where's the, like, I don't need any more disclaimers. Just, okay, check all the boxes, like the exit path. And I feel like this game could have used some more exit paths, because I was sometimes, I mean, I don't necessarily need to see the seams. I don't need to know if, like, which choices are meaningful, but I do want sometimes to, like, oopsie, I engaged in a conversation with a passerby and it's not a casual one, and I'm going to be talking to this person for 5 minutes. I want that off ramp of, nope. You're a side quest I don't want. Bye.
I think about Baldur's Gate 3, where there is literally always an option in dialogue that's like, attack them. Yeah. At some point I was like talking to some like orphan scamp in the middle of town, and I was like, where's my attack them option? I'm just ready to blast this orphan with the gunbrella and move on.
Yeah. This game also makes constant, like, legitimate attempts at humor. You know, and I'll give it some credit in that it's not like internet jokey humor. You know, it's like actually trying to make jokes about its world and its characters and whatnot. So it's like in-world jokes. Mm-hmm. They were rarely very funny to me, you know, so it kind of drug the whole thing down as well, where you could just see it was like a missed attempt at a joke. But I appreciate someone going for the bits. I don't know if you guys got to Seward, which is a great name. The sewer guy.
That was the person that was like, give this guy the thing or give it to the sewer rat guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get to choose whether you give a secret gem back to, like, this authority figure or this sewer guy named Seward. And I don't know if the game cares, but obviously I'm giving it to Seward. And
totally,
you know, it does have, at least, like, you know, my playthrough of the game, like, giving Seward that gem had lasting impacts, or at least it appeared to be. I'd be curious to know what the differences were if you'd given it back to the guy of authority, because Seward is a consistent character throughout the rest of the game, and he's constantly talking about this gem. But
love gems, that's Seward.
I wanted to love this game so much. The mechanic is so good.
It's such a surprise, given like Gato Roboto was like essentially dialogue free. Like it was extremely light on this. Folks, it just makes me think like this is a studio that like didn't know how to do this kind of game, and they took a swing.
No, I think they got feedback that Gato Roboto was too short and slight, and then they like beefed it up, but didn't have time to do more action stuff, so they beefed up dialogue. Like, it's an easy way to. It's a cheaper way to make the game longer.
Yeah,
but they didn't hire a great writer.
Yeah, it's a complicated. It's like the pacing of it. It's not just the writing, right? It's the amount of it and its insertion into the game, and the pacing are all
weird thing.
Are all over the place. And I think it does also suffer too, because like the Gunbrella mechanic, you know, a good game with really interesting mechanics, by the end it's like a real stretch of the mechanic, and you're really mastering it, you know, because you've spent so much time in it. But I don't know, by the end of the game it was definitely more challenging, but not really in a way that made me feel like I was truly stretching my skills. You know, it was just like different challenges, you know.
I have one actually question that I was curious about and didn't get to because I bounced off the game so early. Do you get any meaningful upgrades to your Gunbrella or anything like that? Or it seems like you get like a complete tool set. It's like, here's everything you can do with the Gunbrella. It trains you early on.
Yeah.
And it seemed pretty finished. So I wasn't sure whether there was like an upgrade tree or anything like that. And nothing points.
Not real. Well, yes and no. There is an upgrade tree, but it does two things. You can upgrade its reload speed, which is nice.
That would be a big deal, yeah.
And then you can increase its power, how hard it hits. So it doesn't change any of the fundamental like moveset, but it just makes the Gunbrella itself more powerful. And
that makes sense.
And they were nice. Like I tried to prioritize the reload speed where I could, because that
it's slow.
Yeah. And then there are those other weapons. I read it as the Gunbrella is also firing these weapons. I don't know, but what another part that was kind of disappointing is like I pretty much never used those. Like I never felt compelled to use the rifle rounds, or you get these like buzz saws that you can shoot.
Yeah,
that
grenades as well.
And there's grenades and things like that.
They were very limited resources, and
I only used them for boss. I only used the shotgun unless I was in a boss, and even then
I never even used the additional weapons in bosses. I think I shot like 3 times using a different weapon, and maybe that's
kind of annoying to change weapons, to be honest, and that's why I only did
them
it
because I kept dying while I was trying to switch to the right weapon, and it was easier just to stay on the Gunbrella constantly.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I pretty much never used them except for when they first introduce it. They make you use it to teach you how to use it, and then I pretty much never did again. So
that's a bit of a failing. It's like they figured out a really great move set for the Gunbrella, and then like everything else surrounding that felt not just the story, but even some of these mechanics, like the alternate weapon modes and whatnot, just felt kind of like
secondary.
Yeah. There's a boss fight later on where you're spending most of the time in the air, and like that felt really cool. There's just like 2 small landing points that you can get on, and you have to jump between them and like fire in between. And it's like, this is where this game is really working for me. It was a fun combat. I don't feel like this sort of floating, you compared it to Princess Peach and Mary Poppins, 2 very gentle things. So having this like floating mechanic on a like action-packed shotgun game, felt really unique. And it's like, just it's so close to being so good. They just, I think you're right, Laura. They probably they're like, we got to fill this out. We only have so many puzzles or so many platform scenes. Let's beef it up a little bit.
Because if they had done more action scenes, they would have had to add more mechanics, and they probably didn't want to add more mechanics, and so they'd added more story. And like that's just my guess. I looked around for developer interviews on this one and couldn't find it, but I feel like it was the way they padded out the game to make it feel more robust. And mixed review. I mean, I think we're further down on the story than most people. Clicking around, like, seems like the story worked for some folks, and a lot of people liked the quirky characters.
I saw a lot of thumbs down reviews on Steam with very similar feelings to mine, though.
No, I'm saying critics.
Okay.
But I think we also we know what good storytelling is. We play, like, that's our thing.
It's our whole thing. Yeah.
So
I think there's a world where this game, the story didn't work for any of us, but I'm not surprised to hear that it did click for some people. I think this game has kind of landed pretty mid for most people. But like, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a lot of work went into the story, and
but a streamlined game would have worked better for me.
It would have been
the action.
Honestly, just apply the Gunbrella mechanics to like a completely. The whole time I was thinking, like, you know what, this would be a great weapon for like Kirby or
Super
something.
Smash Brothers Gunbrella.
Yeah, just like put the Gunbrella in Smash, put the Gunbrella in it'd be a great weapon and moveset for almost any game. It works really, really well, but like it doesn't feel great in this game. Mario
Maker Gunbrella.
Yes,
just let me use the Gunbrella. That's when the game shines, when you're using the titular thing.
Just mail Nate a Gunbrella. He wants to have it for his life.
Listen, if you're out there,
got too many kids for that.
I know we aren't a gun household, Molly, but
this is Umbrella.
But this one's an umbrella also. Watch me float. I think you'll understand once you see me floating around.
It's perfect. The cops can't arrest you for carrying an umbrella.
That's right.
Yeah. They also can't arrest you for carrying a gun most places anymore either.
Yeah.
On that note, I don't think there's much left for us to say about Gunbrella. It's available on Steam and Switch, and make of that what you will. It's out there. You can definitely check it out. And I think we had decided we were going to do some What's Making Us Happy this week. And so we've still got that ready to go, even though we ended up talking for like 50 plus minutes about Gunbrella, despite us saying this will be quick. But Laura, what's making you happy this week?
So I have discovered a new podcast. There is a interesting trend where a lot of people had Harry Potter podcasts and then are scrambling to do literally anything else.
Because situation to be in.
Yeah, like a lot of folks, there were people who did Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, which was reading like Harry Potter as if it were a sacred text and you needed to like put the same amount of effort into it. There were people doing like critical theory stuff on Harry Potter. All these people doing really interesting things, but Harry Potter was the core text, and they either finished the book or were like, oh no, can't do that anymore.
Problematic now, in a way. Yeah.
So I was pointed towards something that's pretty new. It's called Material Girls. And they are doing basically they'll look at something like Bridgerton, the TV show, or Star Wars, or Avatar, or Queer Eye, and they'll be like, what's all the academic papers and things that might relate to this, that might explain why it's interesting? Like, why is it popping now? Like, why is this interesting at the time it was like, why did it get big at the time it was big? And it's really interesting because you learn a little bit about like, you'll learn about Marxist theory, or you'll learn about gender theory, or you'll learn about these like really academic things that I wasn't exposed to, but it's light because they're talking about it in terms of Bridgerton, or in terms of like they did something on Goblin Mode, one of the ones I listened to, and they talked about Goblin Mode and the idea of the object, which is from a, quote, Bulgarian French feminist philosopher, Julia Kristeva. I've never been exposed to that, but it's cool to be like, Goblin Mode has interesting
deep roots
and yeah, it's just really fun because
we've been going Goblin Mode for a millennia.
100%. And you're like, this is really cool. It reminds me of going to college and like taking a film class where they'd be like, this is about the Panopticon. You're like, ooh, I've never heard of that. Tell me more. But it's, again, it's got a lightness to it because it's always grounding in pop theory. They're academics who are clearly into mass culture, and it's not the blend is what I like, because I've tried to listen to the homework podcasts that are like, let me tell you what philosophy, and I will fall asleep. But if you're talking about like romance novels and like the study around romance novels for 20 years, like that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah, so it's Material Girls. They only have a couple. Before their podcast was called Witch Please, which I never listened to. It's like 8 seasons of Harry Potter, but I've listened to Goblin Mode, Bridgerton, and Star Wars. Star Wars was all Marxist critique.
Nice.
Oh,
about
well,
about like how they were trying to explain why both Nazis and non-Nazis will see themselves in Star Wars as the rebels. And like, why does that happen? Like, why?
I can't say I've ever considered the politics of Star Wars in that way. That's interesting.
Yeah. And one of the things they talked about was that she taught a class where one reading of the new trilogy of Star Wars, this is your sampler, let's see if you like it. One reading of the new Star Wars trilogy was that it is the new generation reconciling with the fact that they were like, we rejected our parents' stuff and they're, the old ways are gone. Oh no, now the call is coming from inside the house, and Kylo Ren, like one of us, like the people who are supposed to be woke and good and better, has become a fascist. Like fascism is now from inside the house versus a different generation of like overlord. Now it's coming from inside the house. And the teacher, she's like, I taught this, and everyone was like, why are you doing this? Star Wars isn't about anything. She's like, this is the podcast, and if you want Star Wars to be about something, you can listen to this podcast. So it's fun. It feels like I'm eating something substantial, but I'm also not, which is my favorite thing.
It's the Coke Zero
infotainment.
Yeah, it's the Coke Zero of like, is this stuff gonna stay in my brain? Maybe not, but it does feel like a bit more thoughtful way to look at art. The
awesome.
art that I'm gonna consume anyway because I'm trash.
You might as well.
I might
try
as well
to think in have some sort of
a little bit
deeper thought about it.
Yeah. How about y'all?
Well, I have one that's a bit of a follow-up, since it's something I talked about briefly before, but and if you're on the Discord, you may have already seen me talk about this. But I was just going to say, for folks who listened to the Pico 8 episode, I mentioned on that episode that I was considering buying a device that just came out called the Powkiddy RGB 30, which is a portable emulator handheld type of thing. It's like a little, game emulator handheld console thing. And I keep my ear to the ground of the scene of emulator handhelds, just because there's something that I'm always into, but they're full of compromises. Like there's always a new one coming out every week. It seems like there's a new one of these things from some like no name Chinese company, like Anbernic and Powkiddy and Miu and so on. And we did a whole episode on the Miu Mini. This is the first one of those I've bought since, and it's because it's the very first one that does something very unique, and that is that it has a 1:1 square aspect ratio high resolution screen. That's really weird, but it's fantastic for games like Game Boy, Game Gear, like handheld games mostly, the sort of things that are actually quite really, really fun to play on these sorts of things. And it's extremely great for Pico 8 because unlike most of these, this thing runs Linux, but it runs on a Linux chip that is compatible with the version of Pico 8 that's officially published by Lexawful, the people that develop Pico 8, for the Raspberry Pi. So you can take the Raspberry Pi executable that Lexawful directly publishes, drop it onto this device, and it has working Wi-Fi and a square screen just like Pico 8, and it's the most perfect Pico 8 device experience that I've ever played. I've tried Pico 8 on a lot of different setups, and like if you want a handheld Pico 8 machine, this thing is there's literally nothing else better than this. It's absolutely perfect. The screen is incredible, and it's really inexpensive. It's like $90. And the battery life is okay. And even if you decide to play other stuff on it, like I've played some SNES games, some GBA, some other stuff, and all that stuff is fine too. So I just thought I'd give some feedback, since I mentioned I was maybe going to buy that. I did, and it's really good. So if you're thinking about one of these, and especially if the idea of something that's more focused on, a lot of these game consoles, they either have a 4:3 screen, which is sort of catered to the TV game consoles of the 80s and 90s, or they have a 16:9 screen. Maybe you're playing things like more modern games, or from like things like the PSP or other things that had a widescreen. But this has a straight up square screen, and surprisingly that works really well for lots of stuff. Even the 4:3 stuff I was playing, you get a little bit of black bars at the top and bottom, but it's like a 4-inch screen. It's pretty large for one of these handhelds without making the device super, super chunky. So it just sort of felt like a really nice compromise. And it's the first one of these that I've seen that had that form factor. So I really like it. So I recommend it. And you can get it from and on the plus side, Powkiddy, I think, is the worst name of any of these companies in a market where there's a lot of companies with weird brand names. But in this instance, Powkiddy did not put their logo anywhere on the device or anywhere in the software. You will have to go to their website, powkiddy.com, to buy one of these, but then you never have to say or think the words Powkiddy again. So there's that. And
nice.
Recommended. Nate, what's making you happy?
I'm going to run through a few quick things here because I haven't been on the show for a few weeks. But so part of the reason I haven't been around is that I had the opportunity to travel to Budapest for a week, which was a part of the world that I've never been to. And I just wanted to say it was a lovely city. It was beautiful. I had a great time. So I did not think I would, end up there at any point, but got there through a work trip, and it was awesome. So I also managed to accomplish a personal goal of mine that was really poorly timed with this trip to Budapest. So I was I left Budapest on Friday and traveled for roughly 18 hours to get home. And then Sunday morning, I ran my very first ever half marathon.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. So it's something I've been working towards all summer. My goal was just to finish. I do these things, but I am not like, I'm not like highly competitive in them or anything. This is the first time I had ever done one, and I finished, in the bottom third of like finishers and stuff like that.
But you finished.
But I did it. And I did it while supremely jet lagged, which like I spent a week eating Eastern European food, which was very heavy, multiple stews, and and lots of cheese boards and things like that. Some bunch of sausages and whatnot, which were all fantastic. I actually brought my running shoes with me all the way there because in my ideal self, I'm going running through this new city and keeping myself in shape for this, endurance thing that I'm doing the upcoming weekend. And instead I was like, oh, there's a microbrew over there. Well, I'm only here once, so I'm going to go.
Honestly, I think you made the right decision.
I think so too. No regrets.
As someone who's run multiple 5Ks hung over the day after Halloween, you made the right decision.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, absolutely. No regrets. But I still thought it was funny. But I mean, could you think of a worst possible thing to do the week before the week of an endurance thing? Travel across the world and eat stew. So, but I finished it, and I was really happy about that. So that's making me happy. From a content standpoint, I've been kind of half watching The Fall of the House of Usher with Molly, the new Mike Flanagan series. And I've been really enjoying it. It's based on all the Edgar Allan Poe poems and short stories and whatnot, and to see them twisted into just a truly absurd modern TV show. The show is not as ridiculous as a show like American Horror Story.
Sure.
But it's in that world, where everything is just so over the top and silly. That
it'd have to be if it's Poe. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a family of billionaires that are, going through a bunch of the experiences.
Oh, is that so they could do murders at the Rue Morgue? Do they also put that one in?
Oh yeah, they're all there.
Oh yeah, it's just a stew of all the Poe. Okay, yeah, cool.
There's an episode, the episodes are named after the stories or directly reference the stories. The murder at Rue Morgue. There is a Rue Morgue in the show, and there is a murder at the Rue Morgue. So
work some mass.
It's like Penny Dreadful for just Edgar Allan Poe.
So yeah, it's all in there. I won't say that this is my favorite show or anything. I'm not a huge horror guy, and these shows usually make me laugh more than they make me scared.
Sure.
But it's it's October. It's a good time for something like this, and Mike Flanagan now has the rights to the Dark Tower series, which I'm very, very excited about because he does seem like the right guy to do that. So we'll see where that goes. But I'd check it out if you've watched his previous shows. I think this is better than some of the recent ones, and it's a fun time. And I think you'll know pretty quickly if you like it or not. So
I might give that a try. I literally just finished, maybe a couple of weeks ago, reading T. Kingfisher's novel, What Moves the Dead. Which is I read a lot of T. Kingfisher for a little bit there because I loved Thornhedge so much. I forget if I talked about that on the show. Cannot recommend it highly enough. Well, anyway, T. Kingfisher is good. She has a book called What Moves the Dead, which is sort of like a modern rewrite of The Fall of the House of Usher, to be sort of in the more the vein of a modern horror story, but it's set in a really strange world where, not that strange, but slightly strange, where the main character is sort of genderless from a country where soldiers are considered genderless. So anybody, male or female, can become a soldier. But then once you're a sworn soldier, that's its own gender.
Cool.
So it's kind of a weird central character. So it's the Sworn Soldier series. There's apparently a new novel coming out later this year. Sort of a weird book, but yeah. Anyway, House of Usher, neat stuff. Thornhedge was better though. Read Thornhedge; it was really, really good. Laura, I don't know if I've talked to you about Thornhedge. You should read it. I might have. She's nodding. I probably already talked to her about it.
Well, no, yeah. I also had. I have trouble remembering which of T. Kingfisher's things I've read because there's so many of them, and someone starts describing the book, and I'm like, is that one of the titles are not memorable to me?
Totally.
But the books are. The books are great. So I do not think I've read Thornhedge, and you have recommended it to me. But
so good. Where were we? Let's do the outro. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at shortgame.fm, which is a little page with a lot of buttons on it. You can go and subscribe to the show on all the different services. You can go and leave us a review. We just got our 100th review on Apple Podcasts. Took us a long time to get there, but that's still a nice number to hit. We love to see it. But more is always better. Do you want to be 101? We would love to see that happen. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review on whatever podcast service you happen to be using, if they allow reviews. Spotify does now, and you can leave us a review there as well if you happen to listen to us on that godforsaken platform. And
no shade if you're listening.
No judgment. No judgment. I don't like Spotify for a bunch of reasons that are very particular to me. But you use it. We love all our
listeners, regardless of how you're doing it.
Indeed. So leave us a review wherever you happen to be. I've said this on the podcast before, but it's not just about making us feel good. And it's not even just about like making the show up in search results. Like I think those it's the whole thing. People discover the podcast because they go and search for the name of a game or whatever on their podcast platform. And your review might be the thing that makes the algorithm show us to them, and that makes a big difference to us. So we really appreciate it. That's how people find the show. And of course, you can join our Discord community if you become a patron of the show. So you can go to shortgame.fm and click our link for Patreon, or patreon.com/theshortgame. If you're a patron, we will welcome you with open arms to our Discord chat, where we hang out and talk about what's coming up on the show and have a long conversation about Baldur's Gate 3, and everyone's abusing me there because I allowed the short game to cover Baldur's Gate 3. Yes, I know. We're sorry. We're trying to remove it. Let's see. Anything else? You can find me on there, my links, but you can also find me at Raygan.me on the web, which has links to all of my stuff, including my Mastodon, Raygan@bird.rodeo. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on most platforms at Laura J. Nash, and on Mastodon at Laura J. Nash at bird.rodeo.
Yes, and Nate, where can people find you?
Same. You can find me on most social media as @NateSTL, and then Mastodon's NateSTL.bird.rodeo.
And listeners, thank you once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.